Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a scientific paper that makes a really bold claim. That tucked away inside the COVID-19 virus's genetic code are these hidden mathematical patterns. Patterns that the author says point to a synthetic origin. So let's break down the evidence and see what it's all about.
And that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? A 2020 paper by Jean-Claude Perez tries to answer it. Now, his approach is to look past the surface-level stuff and analyze the virus's entire genome, hunting for these big, mathematical structures that he believes could tell the real story of where it came from.
So, how did this whole investigation get started? Well, the author looked at 9 different SARS-related genomes, searching for what they call a coherent evolutionary strategy, basically a pattern of adaptation that doesn't look random at all.
Right? So instead of getting bogged down in tiny, isolated mutations here and there, the goal was to find these huge mathematical patterns that stretch across the entire genome. The thinking is, patterns that big might reveal a structured, almost deliberate way the virus was adapting.
Okay, so the very first clue the paper lays out is something the author calls a Fibonacci fingerprint. If you remember the Fibonacci sequence from math class, this is kind of like that. A specific, repeating mathematical order that he says is hiding right there in the genetic code.
Now, to find these patterns, the paper uses a method that looks for stationary waves. The best way to think about this is like searching for a hidden rhythm, a repeating beat in the music of the genetic code. The author's method scans the whole genome to see if these rhythms are consistent and structured.
And this slide really illustrates the paper's first big aha moment. On the left, you see the wave pattern for the 2003 SARS virus. Pretty simple, right? Just a single wave. But then, look at the 2020 Wuhan virus on the right. The paper claims it shows multiple, much more complex waves. The whole argument is that this complexity didn't happen by chance. It grew over 17 years.
Now let's dig into this table, which is based on the paper's data. It really shows a step-by-step progression. You see the early viruses, from 2003 up to 2012, they only have that one 5-base pair wave going on. But then, bam, in 2015, 2 more waves suddenly pop up. And by the time we get to 2020, the Wuhan virus supposedly has all 4 of these Fibonacci waves active.
So, here's the crucial point of this first clue. The author is suggesting this isn't just random genetic noise. No, the paper proposes this growing mathematical structure is a sign that the virus is becoming more organized and maybe, just maybe, better suited for humans.
All right, let's get into the second clue. And I gotta tell you, this is where the analysis takes a sharp turn into some really surprising and, frankly, highly debated territory. We're gonna be talking about some very specific genetic sequences here.
Okay, so the author flat out asserts that a tiny little section of the COVID-19 genome has genetic material that looks a whole lot like parts of HIV, the virus that causes AIDS in humans, and SIV, which is the version found in monkeys.
And this right here is the core piece of evidence for that second clue. It's a diagram from the paper that maps out exactly where these 6 alleged inserts are. And as you can see, the author makes a big deal about how they are all jammed together in this incredibly small window. We're talking just 300 base pairs.
And here, the paper breaks down where each of these little fragments supposedly came from. The analysis points to pieces from different HIV-1, HIV-2, and SIV strains from all over the world. And they all seem to correspond to genes that are super important for the virus, either for building its outer shell, its envelope, or for the machinery it uses to copy itself. Okay, so we've got these 2 clues, the evolving Fibonacci patterns and these alleged bits of HIV. So how do they come together? Well, the author connects these 2 dots to draw a final and pretty shocking conclusion about where this virus came from.
The paper basically argues that all these features are just too neat, too organized to be an accident of nature. The author points to how tightly packed these inserts are, the fact that they come from so many different sources, and, this is the big one, what looks like a symmetrical pattern. It starts and ends with a polymerase fragment, which helps it replicate, with 4 envelope fragments, the virus's shell, smack in the middle.
And this direct quote from the paper's conclusion pretty much sums it all up. You can really feel the author's conviction here. The use of words like logic and symmetries in all caps with all those exclamation points, it really emphasizes this belief that these patterns aren't natural, but instead point to human intervention. So, what does this all mean, according to the author? This brings us to the paper's final takeaway, and really, the whole reason this analysis matters.
The paper does not mince words.
The abstract makes its position crystal clear. It doesn't just suggest this is a possibility. It claims it offers formal proof that the genome is, at least in part, synthetic.
And here's where it all ties together. The author theorizes that these supposed modifications, working together with that organized Fibonacci structure, aren't just a calling card of its origin. They could actually be functional, possibly explaining why the virus spreads so fast, by making it uniquely good at adapting to and integrating with our human cells.
So at the end of the day, this paper gives us one very controversial interpretation of the genetic data. And it's an interpretation that, it's important to note, is not widely accepted in the mainstream scientific community. But it leaves us with this provocative question. Are these patterns just weird flukes in the data? Or do they actually represent a synthetic signature, like the author claims? It's a question that's still right at the heart of the intense, ongoing debate to understand this pandemic.